Again, what we are doing at this stage, at the stage of temporary prosthetics, so-called prototyping, we assess the situation worse, better. If again we feel worse, we must analyze why the situation has developed. But this again is a very rare moment because all the problems that a patient may have, they appear at the stage of course, pre-prosthetic preparation. That is, if you suddenly had some kind of dissonance during the temporary prosthetics, then here is a need to figure it out and again the scope of this problem, because you, for example, can see chips. I had a patient, a bruxist, and such patients have a certain pattern of bruxing. That is, such patients will break temporary crowns in a particular area because they have a certain stereotype of movement. And here we are again, referring to permanent prosthetics, you can manufacture these areas of pure zirconium, make metal shields if it's metal ceramics or prosthetics on precious metal and so on. That is, you have already an understanding that there may be some problems, and again, you can warn the patient or decide to create the so-called night protective mouth guard. If again everything is fine, then we proceed to the next stage of permanent prosthetics. The fact is that permanent prosthetics is the final stage of our medical work, but it isn't a copy of temporary crowns, colleagues. Therefore, I never perform permanent prosthetics or transferring data that I received on temporary prosthetics or after temporary prosthetics by cross-fixing method. That is, one half of the crowns are removed and silicone is pushed inward, then the second half the silicone, and for example, with the help of temporary crowns themselves, we transfer their ratio and height of the bite. The fact is, once again, we act sequentially. The first stage is pre-prosthetic preparation, received plus, so it's improvement. The second stage is temporary prosthetics, and we must improve the situation. And the third stage, it should not copy the second, it should still improve the situation. Therefore, once again, we develop patterns of movements, and even at the diagnostic stage, at the planning stage, we understand where the lower jaw should be, whether anterization will be performed or not, what will be the height of the bite, and within this framework we work. Only a precise CUI ratio of the jaws from which we move the lower jaw using an articulator. This approach, this protocol, what will allow you to double-check yourself at each stage, gradually improve the situation. Even from a legislative perspective, every stage, by checking and showing improvement, you show that you are treating the patient correctly, that here objectively he felt bad, here felt better, here he objectively became even better. Colleagues, you do not make crowns, we don't stamp them. What do we do by crowns? We treat patients. Therefore, our stage, our protocol implies once again consistent steps in improving the patient's condition. And after that, we carry out prosthetics. So back to our patient with two crowns. Take a look once again, his front teeth are quite worn out. How do we act? We perform palpation, we calculate the occlusal index. This patient has a fairly calm muscle situation and not very high occlusal index, although it's higher than normal. We use occlusograms for analysis. That is, once again, the diagnostics includes a fairly comprehensive approach. Occlusograms allows you to conduct a very fast occlusal analysis. It's an express analysis that allows you to understand the scheme of patient management, do the occlusal scheme and overload zones, a lot of questions and solutions. That is necessary to provide a high-quality intraoral photography, and you must understand what's in the patient's mouth. That is, that the brain work of doctor is interesting enough because he analyzes even if we do not think about it. And now, as usual, you remember something, but there is no patient nearby, and you need to see that. What do? You open his profile, you open his photos, look at the position of the teeth, are there any problems there, and your decision will be more conscious. You see, in this case, I measure the size of the tracks. Once again, if you have occlusograms and other diagnostics, you can analyze all this either deeply or very deeply. The next point is the instrumental analysis. We mount gas on the articulator. Pay attention to this case. What have I done? I did the restoration using wax up. And when I perform movements, this wax breaks. Not that even the gypsum tooth has broken. That is, if we simply restore this patient's front teeth with ceramic veneers, crowns, even just with a composite, the first thing he will do is to break them with any movements. Here you see the mechanism of load development, because in this case the entire load is concentrated on the front teeth. When closed, and occurs exactly the same mechanism as that of a walnut. However, we offer this patient three treatment options. Two of them include orthodontic treatment, and the third option is understandable total prosthetics with again orthodontic preparation. And the first option is just the restoration of these incisors with composite. How, you ask? How is this possible? We even carried out a wax simulation diagnostic test. We see that all these chipped off. Prior to this, no one doctor could restore these teeth. They infinitely broke, and even the teeth themselves were broken. How can this be done? That is, in fact, once again, as part of our work, we must offer the patient alternative treatment options, and in this case, we offer them to him. Again, please note that in our patient, during all movements occurs chipping in our restoration. However, what can we do? What I'll start with? I won't start with the restoration of incisors, but with restoration of canines. We make the canine guidance, in this case, more curved. At the same time, any movement that the patient will conduct thus will lead to disocclusion of teeth, so that the incisors will not break. Pay attention, I restore the canines and let's look at the next slide more closely. You see, I form tracks, and for these tracks I use the 8-micron black carbon paper. I have a canine that conducts the protrusion, and I have already restored one of my teeth. The protrusion track, the blue carbon paper, is 140 microns. And pay attention to this slide. I restored with composite the incisor. I put an 8-micron carbon paper in the area of the canine. I carry out the movement. This patient underwent further prosthetic preparation. See, we made him a splint, he used it. And also further an orthodontic treatment was performed. All this period, for 2 years, while he was undergoing orthodontic treatment, our restoration did not break down and have served him for now, although this work was done 4 or 5 years ago. Because, while this patient, he didn't perform prosthetic treatment of the front teeth, although it's indicated for him. So, in this case, what does this example show us? We can solve problems of patients in different ways, and even sometimes in such difficult cases when the total intervention is uniquely required, there are related moments and techniques that allow us to get into patient's occlusion scheme as part of the bite that this patient already has. And I'll teach you all this, show you and share my experience in the following videos. Thank you very much for your attention, patience, and we are waiting for you at our courses, on our events, as well as online. We hold webinars, and we will be glad to see you live. And also watch our videos. We will be happy for your subscribe, write your questions and your advice, and share your experience. This is also important for us. Thank you very much.